Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our September monthly webinar for the 22-23 school year. This morning, we are going to talk about all things related to the Texas application for state financial aid, otherwise known as the TASFA. So we are recording that has started already. We see lots of familiar names and faces in the chat. If you want to keep going and introduce yourself so we know who's here. And we have reserved from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. this morning to cover all sorts of things, updates and information on the TASFA, the paper and the online versions. And we've got several different people joining us this morning that know a lot about this, about the application. So my name's Laura Guggen. I'm Director of Program Implementation. We're housed at Texas OnCourse, and we are located at the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board. So I'm going to pass it over to Ashley so she can say hello. And we have a couple more guest speakers this morning that are joining us.
Hello, my name is Ashley McKenzie, and I am one of the program specialists. And so I was a high school counselor for about 6.5 years, and now I'm with Texas OnCourse, and I'll be excited to share some of our great resources with you this morning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley. Claudette?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Claudette Jinks, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. I've been with the agency for about, I think, 17 years already. I've done a number of different college access programs. I've overseen a number of college access programs, including the Applied Texas system, Advice Texas, and of course the TASFA, online TASFA. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Leah, so she can introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leah Smalley. I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid Services, and which is at the Coordinating Board. And our area primarily oversees supporting institutions of higher education. And for the past 6 years, I've overseen the TASFA in my area. So my team's the one that develops the paper form. And then I've worked side by side with Claudette for the past, I think it's about 1.5 years now, on building the online TASFA. So excited to be here with y'all and be able to answer questions if y'all have them. So Laura, I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leah, Claudette, and Ashley. We have a couple other folks from our team as well. So the links that we've got that we're covering, we have Andrea Panter, who's sharing her screen, and Isaiah Garcia, both part of the coordinating board, and they're going to be dropping in links and also keeping track of our question and answer. And just so you all know, we are recording and we will send this to everyone that's registered. We have over 350 people registered this morning, but we know that people in schools cannot always join live. So we'll send all the information out as well as the links and the resources that we drop in the chat. So here's our agenda and the things that we're going to cover this morning. We do want to just sort of do a full overview of the TASFA because, as you all know, it changes from year to year. There's some questions that have been removed. There's been some updates, and we of course have some, information to share as well on the online TASFA. So we'll go over the application itself. And Ashley McKenzie, we have some really fantastic resources to just support your financial aid, all of the things that you are doing with your seniors and their families. We have some resources we want to spotlight for you from Texas OnCourse, as well as resources we've built with TEA, and some things we have coming out of the coordinating board. So Ashley's going to cover several different resources for you. As with the TASFA and the federal application, the FAFSA, there's eligibility requirements and questions that we have all the experts here to answer those, and we'll talk a little bit about eligibility. And then just talk a little bit about the sections on the TASFA. We always have just some like best practices and tips on completing it, sending in the forms, how you want to get to full completion. And then, as you all know, the Apply Texas Counselor Suite is integrating the tracking of the TASFA for the first time this year. So we're going to also talk about what that reporting looks like when the online goes live in the Apply Texas Counselor Suite. And we'll cover that toward the end of the webinar. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So just to generally kick this off, last year was, of course, the first year in Texas where we had a requirement under Texas Education Code. So if you'll pop to the next slide, we just like to cite the code so that you know what this is when you're talking to your, campus administrators, new administrators. There's lots of change right now going on in K-12 systems. A lot of you are probably working with new teams. But if you did this last year, you, of course, became very familiar with the financial aid application requirement required for high school graduation. And that simple language is just right there. And that says that before graduating from high school, each student must complete and submit a free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, or a Texas application for state financial aid, TASFA. So the next slide talks a little bit about what the exceptions are to meeting that requirement, and of course, what's required. So a student, and generally speaking, we talk about their families as well, because their family information is required for both of the applications, whether or not they're filling out a FAFSA or they're doing a TASFA application. So a student is not required to comply with this requirement for the following 3 reasons listed here. The student's parent or the other person, another person standing in a parental relationship, submits a signed form indicating that they choose to decline to complete and submit a financial aid application. So that first one there is the parent or someone in a parent relationship. And the second one is if a student signs and submits a form, which is called an opt-out form, which we have on the next slide. That opt-out form is if the student is 18 years or older. And there's some other things there, information about disabilities that we can go into a little bit further. But those are just the general exceptions for student and parent. And then the third one is that a school counselor can also authorize the student decline to complete and submit a financial aid application for a good cause as determined by that counselor. And that is also through the opt-out form. So if you want to pop to the next slide, you can see, so we had opt-out forms put out by TEA for the class of 2022. And these opt-out forms, that's an example of one there. And Isaiah just dropped that into the chat. So those forms are available in English and Spanish. And you just are going to want to already, even think about how you want to track those. We had a year last year. Some campuses and folks even did this prior to the actual requirement. But you can see there where the student information is listed. And then option 1 is that student authorization on the right side of the screen here on the form. And the option 2 is the parent authorization. And option 3 listed there is the counselor authorization. So this is something that needs to be made available to your students and families with, of course, the class of 2023, and also tracked in your campus in some way, shape, or form. And we've added that link in the chat there to the opt-out forms. A couple of things about reporting to TEA, and this is we're just kind of generally speaking covering this. There's also more information available on TEA's website, but districts are required to report this in your PEIMS. So if you have a PEIMS clerk or you have data folks, they're going to want to know this because this is in your student data files. So that data element and that code table, if you know a whole lot about data, that's listed there. And this data is also entered into the TREC system. So if you get a new student, have a new senior toward the end of the school year, or even now, that information is going to be in their TRECs, in their TRECs file, or if you have a student leave, it will be in their TRECs file when they exit your campus. So just a couple of quick highlights. I think this is kind of an interesting data piece to share before we get into TASFA, because it's like, why are we doing this? Why did we have this policy last year? We just came out of a pandemic. The data that's listed here is from NCAN, and this is really national FAFSA data. So you can see, so on the left side is overall rankings for the class of 2022. So you can see that Louisiana was ranked #1, and they have the same type of requirement. It's required in Louisiana and Tennessee to do financial aid applications. And I think this link to this data will be dropped in the chat as well. So you can see that Texas was listed #6 nationally, and 65% of our seniors completed financial aid. So on the right side is the percentage of change. So that's the percentage of change from the year before. So you can see that Texas, coming from the class of 2021, where it was not a requirement or not a policy or a mandate, whatever you want to use, that in the class of 22, we had an increase of 22% in the percentage of students completing financial aid. So we had the highest level of increase nationally, which I think is really cool data to share. So that's all your hard work right there. So we can share more of that data as well. So that's that tracker is listed in the chat under financial aid application completion tracker if you wanted to see more of that data. All right, I'm going to kick it over to Ashley, who's going to talk about some of the resources we wanted to share. And just in case I do see a couple hands up and some questions, we're going to have some time at the end to attend to those.
Right, perfect. So like Laura said, that financial aid graduation requirement is a heavy load on counselors. So the first resource that I'd like to spotlight are our financial aid requirement website and toolkits. We have worked with TEA to develop this resource, not only for counselors, but for families, students, and also our community partners that support us. So on the next slide, you can see a little bit about what you will get when you download these resources. You can access these online through the Texas OnCourse website, and you can also download them as PDFs. All of these resources have been updated recently based on counselor and family feedback. And so we've worked really hard to see what you guys need to help you get this job done. We've added additional links. We've updated some of our resources, and now almost all of the resources that we link for you or that we have produced for you are available in both English and Spanish, so that you can download them and use them with your Spanish speaking families. Anytime there's not one available, we have recommendations for how to translate that. And then additionally, the family toolkit is already translated into, the entire toolkit is translated into Spanish. So if you needed to download that and print it for your families, that's also available for you. These are really comprehensive pieces that can help you with both TASFA completion and FAFSA. As new TASFA information is released, and Claudette will cover that later, we will also update these throughout the year. So expect new resources to be added later. In addition to our financial aid website and toolkits, if you are familiar with Texas OnCourse, you may already know about our academy, but I just want to point out that we have some modules to help you prepare for financial aid applications this year. We have our FAFSA application module that has been updated recently. And so it gives you great information about how to complete the FAFSA, common errors, how to determine which application is appropriate for your students. And we've added more information this year about the new multi-factor authentication process that FSA ID is requiring. So you'll find that new information if you're not familiar with it. In addition to our FAFSA module, we also have updated our TAFSA module. Similarly, it'll show you how to complete the TAFSA application with your students, what students need to do, what information they need to gather. And this has been updated recently, and we will also update it again as new online TAFSA information is added. The next resource, and if you're not familiar, you can create an account for the OnCourse Academy through our website, and it utilizes Canvas as our learning system. So if you use Canvas in your district, you may be familiar with it. And so you'll just click on the financial aid application process class, and then you will see those two modules listed there for you. All right, our next resource that I would like to encourage you to share with your students is our Ask ADVI Virtual Advisor for Texas students. If you are not familiar with this resource, it's a great way to get financial aid and college and career information directly to your students. Students can opt in to ADVI when they create their Apply Texas application. When they're filling out their profile information, there is a question that asks if they consent to receiving communication from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And so while this question doesn't list anything specific to ADVI or the virtual advisor, if they click yes to this, they will be added to our system and they will receive regular campaigns from ADVI that provides them with help and support and links to additional information. Our bot is trained to respond to questions, but anytime a student has a question that the bot can't answer, it is forwarded to one of our amazing human ADVI advisors, and they can reach out directly to the student via text message, answer their questions, and then direct them for more information. Currently, ADVI messages do go out in English only, but if you have a student that needs to have questions answered in Spanish, they can ask for that and they'll be connected to one of our Spanish speaking advisors. And then finally, our last resource that I want to highlight for you is a new resource that is our parent-facing resource called Tomorrow Ready Texas. And so this is designed specifically for families and parents in Texas to help prepare their students from 8th grade through 12th grade to become college ready. We do currently have Tomorrow Ready Texas in beta, so you can access it and begin looking at it and sharing it with your families. And then a Spanish version of the site will launch in October. So when parents access Tomorrow Ready Texas, they can choose the grade level of their student and the type of information that they want to access. They can receive specialized to-do lists for career, college, financial wellness, including financial aid information, life skills, and the military. And one of the great things about Tomorrow Ready Texas is that we do place a special emphasis on providing resources with students with disabilities. And so parents will find a lot of information about transitioning from high school to post-secondary for students with disabilities in this website. And those are all of our resources that we're highlighting for you today. We hope that you will explore them. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. My email address is on the opening page, and then hopefully find these good use. Thank you.
Hi, Ashley. We do have one question, if you don't mind answering it really quickly. If a student has already completed their Apply Texas and did not opt in at that time, can they go back to the opt-in ADVI?
Yes, they can update so when a student completes their Apply Texas, they can't change their application to the college, but they can update their profile because they may want to go ahead and add additional schools that they apply to. So students can log into their profile and update information there, and they can opt into that service. That was
Great.
a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Absolutely.
All right, great. We're going to talk a little bit about TASFA updates here and what is happening this school year. So I know we have lots of people joining us. This is a really big webinar, and it's okay if we put a lot of information in the chat. But if you want to just take a minute and tell us in the chat, what is your current level of comfort with completing the TASFA? And you can, let's go with beginner. So you're just getting started, you feel like a beginner, or intermediate, which is somewhere in the middle, or you feel like you're an expert. We just love to take a minute and see who's on the, I see lots of beginners. It's great. It's like a chat waterfall here of experience. This is actually really helpful for like the folks when we put our information together. Yes, people are set up for FAFSA. Those are also a whole other set of updates. Intermediate, expert, and beginner. This is really great. Perfect. And of course, like we mentioned, it's always great to talk a little bit about the modules because those are some other great resources in there as well, things to support if you want to increase your learning. So just in general, we're going to talk a little bit about the TASFA for the beginners here. The Texas application for state financial aid is that acronym. And it, of course, is housed out of the coordinating board, and that should be a free application. That application should always be free, just like the FAFSA or the federal application. And it helps determine eligibility for state financial aid programs in institutions of higher ed in the state of Texas. Okay, so this is a state application for state institutions. And also eligibility for institutional scholarships is usually assessed through the TASFA as well. So lots of different questions on eligibility. I think that's really great that we have Leah and Claudette here this morning joining us because there's lots of intricacies and specific questions we get about the TASFA. But that is just in general what the TASFA is. The paper TASFA or PDF is available October 1st, and we encourage folks to complete the TASFA by the earliest deadline to receive the most aid, and that state priority deadline is January 15th. However, nothing closes January 15th. We're just encouraging families to get that in by that date, and they can also submit the TASFA after that deadline as well. So just some eligibility requirements. This is a really great handout we have from Texas OnCourse that talks about this if you would like to use it and give it out. We'll drop the link in. So who should complete a TASFA? Students who are not eligible to apply for federal student aid using the FAFSA. So in 99.9% of circumstances, I'd like to say all, but it always seems like there's an anomaly there somewhere. Students do not complete both the FAFSA and the TASFA. So that state eligibility requirement there on the right, a student must meet the following 4 provisions. So those are in those boxes there. The first is graduation. So they have to graduate from a public or a private high school or receive in Texas equivalency to that. So that might be a GED, could be something online, but a public or a private high school or equivalency. And then on the right, there's 3-year residency. So residing in Texas for at least 3 years or 36 months leading up to high school graduation or receive a high school equivalency. And then in the bottom left box is 12-month residency. So student must reside in Texas for 12 consecutive months right before the semester that they are enrolling in college. And then that last box there, which we get a lot of questions about, is that notarized affidavit that provides the institution of a notarized affidavit that states the student will submit an application to become a U.S. permanent resident as soon as they are eligible to do so. And I believe that's been added to the chat right there. And also we have, of course, the FAFSA link there and the TASFA link, which is at collegeforalltexans.com. Just a couple of things real quickly on FAFSA versus TASFA. That federal is a free application for federal student aid, and students that apply for that are your US citizens, permanent US residents, and eligible non-citizens. And they can find that FAFSA app at studentaid.gov. And the Texas application for state financial aid are students who are typically residents. They're not eligible to complete the FAFSA. And of course, that is listed there at College for All Texans. And it's also going to be on the coordinating board website as well. So applying for state aid, we get this question a lot, and I used to have it as well doing TASFA apps with students. State aid includes grants, scholarships, loans, and work study programs for your students that are applying for state aid through the TASFA. And I think it's just important to mention as well that they can receive state aid through the FAFSA application also. So College for All Texans is one of our websites, and we have a lot of information there. Leah is an expert on what's listed here as well, but all sorts of information there on applying for college, the TASFA PDF in English and Spanish as well, and lots of different information there on even like tuition, financial assistance, state and federal grants and scholarships, exemptions, waiver programs, work study programs, military programs, and that sort of thing. And you can see all that listed there. And just as a general reminder, of course, the state priority deadline, FAFSA and TASFA, we're getting going with those here really quickly in a couple of weeks on October 1st. But the state priority deadline is established just to prioritize the limited funding. Funding for some of these programs does run out and changes from year to year. So as I mentioned earlier, students can apply after January 15th. We just want them to prioritize getting this in as early as possible, shooting for before January 15th at Texas institutions. So I want to give Claudette a minute to talk a little bit about clarifications and any announcements and updates on the TASFA. Claudette, do you want to talk a little bit about the TASFA application itself and what's happening with the online version?
Sure. So, I was going to provide the update, but I'll go ahead and also clarify that the coordinating board has created the TASFA beginning with this financial aid cycle 2023-2024, and thereafter. The TASFA document is going to be available through the Apply Texas website, and it will be the sole acceptable printable version of the TASFA. And this is the only application that the institutions may accept from applicants who do not have access to the technology to complete the online version. So the bill that passed a couple of sessions ago created the TASFA as the sole application for institutions to accept. The online TASFA will be available also through the Apply Texas application, and it'll also be the sole acceptable online TASFA, and that is coming soon. So I'm going to share a little bit of some updates for you, just to kind of reference a couple of notifications that went out on Thursday, August 25th, and again on September 1st to the Texas OnCourse listserv. They sent a notice to everyone on that listserv that the online TASFA for the 23-24 release will be delayed. This is in case you did not receive that notification. We just wanted to inform you of that. The coordinating board is working hard to finalize that development of the online TASFA to ensure that all the users and the institutions have a quality experience with the application. To ensure students can maximize financial aid funding, however, we are encouraging students to complete the paper TASFA during this year's financial aid cycle. The paper TASFA will be available on October 1 of 2022. We are encouraging students to complete it as early as possible. And as Laura mentioned several times, the priority deadline for financial aid is January 15th, 2023. So that's why we're wanting to make sure that students are able to maximize their financial aid funding and not wait for the online version. Extending this timeline, the timeline for the online TASFA will help us enable us to provide adequate training to our educators, students, and families, and help improve data transmission with institutions. As Ashley mentioned earlier, we work very closely with the OnCourse team to update resources and share messages as they become available. In the meantime, we're working to ensure students and institutions have that high quality experience with the online TASFA. And so we're doing extensive testing both internally and externally so that it's adequately functional and ready for you all to use when it's available. We're also planning outreach to support educators, students, and their families when the product launches. And our goal is to release the online TASFA this year, but as we work to finalize that development, we will alert stakeholders of new release dates and other milestones. So we just want to make sure that you all are aware of this and have that information to make sure that you have these students prioritize the paper version so that they're not missing that opportunity to apply for state aid. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leah.
It's actually going back over to Laura.
Oh, to Laura, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
No problem. So just we are going to kick it over to Leah here in just a little bit, but just to talk a little bit about the paper TASFA alignment, you can see here there's some changes and updates from the 22-23 paper TASFA to the 23-24 FAFSA. As you know, I just want to state this: your students that are seniors right now are completing the 23-24 paper TASFA. So because that is their award year, that is the year that they're going to be enrolling or actively in college or at an institution. So the paper TASFA for the 23-24 will have a new flow and will better align with the FAFSA. So it seems like it's going to be pretty seamless. Tracks really closely with the FAFSA. We've already seen some updates from FAFSA that we've done with UAspire, and there will be separate student and parent sections. So just real quickly before we dive into the sections, many of you know this, but I saw we had a lot of beginners in the chat. So this is the type of, when you're starting this type of application, you want to make sure the people that you're working with, their students and families, know what kind of documentation they want to have prepared or already requested to complete this, because it's not usually just something that you sit down and do, just impromptu without the necessary documentation. So students might be requested to upload additional documentation. We've always said that a lot of this depends on the institution, but it is getting easier and it is becoming more simplified. But college portals and institutions certainly might ask for more specific information, but that just kind of goes for financial aid in general. But it may include, but is really not limited to the following, and that includes the notarized affidavit of intent. So that form there might need to be ready and uploaded if it hasn't already been sent in. Tax filers may need to submit a copy of the IRS tax return that they have. That might include or be in addition to W-2s. And dependent students, this is for dependent students only that are reporting their information of their parents, which is probably the majority of your applications, and includes the student information if they worked. And then non-tax filers might need to submit a non-filing letter from the IRS or a signed statement or an IRS tax return transcript. So anything related to income they have in prior years. And then before we jump into all of the sections, I think it's just important to address that many of your families that are in these types of situations with questions and specific concerns A lot of them are tax related. So we understand that as, school staff, campus staff, and educators, I don't know that anybody expects you or should expect you, to be a tax advisor, a financial advisor. Really, you just want to make sure that you're encouraging families to meet their filing requirements, how to file a tax return, with just general information to avoid barriers to receive financial aid. And of course, the correct information, if a student or parent is an undocumented worker and they do not have a social security number. So they can also file taxes using an ITIN or an individual taxpayer identification number issued by the IRS. So that's something that they can get, and you can always share that with your students and families as well. But we definitely recognize that income and financial aid is certainly a sensitive topic, and it can be challenging to cover with students and families, of course. Okay, we're going to turn it over to Leah to talk a little bit about the paper TASFA sections.
Thank you, Laura. So thank you again for having me today. I think I mentioned at the beginning, for anyone who wasn't on, my area over the past 6 years has overseen the development of the paper TASFA. And then when the legislation happened to develop an online form, they did ask me to get involved. And so I've been working very closely with Claudette. And for the past year and a half or so, we have been developing the online form. So before we get into the online, I saw a lot of comments. I saw boo-hoo, it's not happening, but we want y'all to still be excited about it. It is coming. We've been working so hard on the form, but what we don't want is to roll something out that's not going to be a good experience. And so we have to go through all the different steps so that y'all are excited and happy to use the tool with your students once it's there. So when we thought about developing the paper TASFA this year, what we do is we always meet with a committee, and the committee is comprised of institutions of higher education. And then we also include counselors from different high schools. So I don't know if any of them are on this call right now, but we do have representation from the high school setting. And so they can provide their feedback, and then a few other organizations. So this year, when we were looking at the paper TASFA, we not only were taking the feedback that we normally get, but then we were looking at the online form and we say, okay, well, what do we want to do for this year? So what you see on your screen is actually an updated version. You can see it does look different. It has a new banner, it has a new color scheme, it has a lot less color on it. This is a draft, so this is not for distribution yet, but just wanted y'all to get the overall feel of what it's going to look like, because it did change. At a glance, it's not significant, but once you start looking at it, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that used to be over there, and we move things around, and then it is just very different. Now, we are going to be publishing this, as we said, on College for All Texans on October 1st, which is a Saturday. So if you want to log in and look at it, you are more than welcome. But we will be posting that to align with FAFSA release. Now, this year, what we had to make determinations are what questions really hold value. We are trying to simplify things for people. And what we found over and over again was there was these questions on TASFA that really are not verified, I hate using that word, but confirmed through the institution using the TASFA. So on the screen, you're going to see, approximately 8 items there. So date of graduation. Are you really going to look at an application to confirm that they graduated high school? No, you're going to look at their transcript, their college grade level. A lot of times people put the wrong one. So we didn't want some of these things to drive decisions in financial aid. We wanted to use real documentation. So the committee decided that all of the ones on your screen were really not necessary because they were either collecting them in a different way or they just didn't need them. So real quickly, if you were looking at the 22-23 form, we removed question 17, which is date of graduation, number 19, which is college grade level, their degree or certificate, the number of credits enrolled, which we know can change from when they fill out the TASFA to when they actually get there. Associate degree transfers, again, they would likely use a transcript to confirm that. The conviction restriction, which a lot of people refer to as maybe a drug question or controlled substance question, that has not gone away. We removed it from the TASFA because most institutions of higher education have a dedicated process or form for students to fill out, and it only applies to 2 financial aid programs. It applies to the Texas grant and then the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant, or TEOG. So we really didn't feel like it was necessary to keep it on there because it just confused people, and it may even steer people away from it if they're not really sure what that means. So it's gone now, but it's still a law that we have to check for that requirement. It's just done at the institutional level. Number 26 was previously received state aid. Based on our feedback, they were like, oh, I don't know if I got state aid. They start listing all sorts of interesting things. So again, it wasn't very helpful. And then number 27 is work authorization and work study interests. So if your student has work authorization, they could get a job. Those are less likely, but they could qualify for a work study position. But it's our understanding that a lot of times institutions are promoting that internally or through their websites. And so again, didn't really have a lot of value. All right, so let's take a look at the actual form. So we're going to move forward. One of the things you just saw on the screen too was this year you have to remember that schools have to accept the TASFA. It's a new law. In the past, they could do a FAFSA form. Sometimes schools had their own form. Maybe there was a branded version that the school would use, but this year it's a state form. It's in the law that way. So you can't have a school saying, oh, I'm not going to accept that TASFA. They have to this year. Once we get into the form, you can see that we've now broken it down. I believe there's 5 sections. So section 1 is the student's information, and it kind of has like a demographic section, and then it goes into that whole educational background where they designate, you know, did they get a diploma? Did they get a GED? Any of those things. And then you'll see the selective service statement. This is always a hot topic. If any of you are familiar with the FAFSA changes, you may be familiar with they are not asking students or verifying students on the FAFSA anymore. The state still requires that the student designate their status to receive state aid, and that goes for FAFSA students and TASFA students. So institutions of higher education are trying to find ways to collect this from students for their status. What has gone away is they no longer have to provide proof to an institution unless the institution's like, oh, you know, we have some, we'll call conflicting information. But every year we've had the selective service as a section within the form, and that will continue to be there because they still have to meet that in order to receive state aid. But what they won't have to do is provide the card or provide, you know, like a written statement unless the school asks for it. So you'll notice on this section, it no longer has the little piece about I will have to provide proof once I have that. The student is simply required to answer the question there. Either they're born female, they don't have to register. They were born male and they're under 18 and therefore they're not currently required to register by law. They are born male and they are registered, so they already did it. They would mark that box. I was born male and over 18. I'm not registered and I'm not exempt. That's going to be for your students that are like, you know, I'm not going to do it. Don't want to do it. They mark that box. Lastly, you have the exempt box. I was born male and I'm exempt from registration. And then they would put the reason there. Institutions will determine if that reason is sufficient. I can't tell y'all there's like a master list of exemption reasons. If you go on to selective service, you will find that things like hospitalization or if they were incarcerated, those kind of things. Now, the population of students y'all are working with, unfortunately, they still have time to register. So it's unlikely that they'll be exempt, but if they feel that they are exempt, they can mark that box and put it there. I would not try and, you know, sit there and analyze their situation too much. I would leave that to the institution to kind of confirm their status. And I'm sure I'll get lots of questions in a minute on selective service, so happy to answer those in just a moment. Now, I did have one person last week who asked the question, what if I help my student register through the mail and we send it off, what are we supposed to put? And my short answer was, are they considered registered? You don't have any proof of that, but you don't have to provide proof. So you would mark the registered box and move forward. You know, if the school comes back and says, hey, we really need the card for whatever reason, at that point they would need to provide that, but it's unlikely that they would need that. Moving on to the second page here, you can see that we now have kind of an assets question. None of these questions are new, they're just reorganized. And again, we did this to align with the online version, which you're in luck because we're going to look at it today. But first, touching on what you're going to be using starting in October. As you kind of move through the screen, you'll notice that there's the tax information, and then you have your dislocated worker questions, and then you have your additional financial aid information. Again, all of these should align with last year's, they're just in a different order. And we have taken the student and parent and separated them. Before they were kind of side by side. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next page, and this is a continuation of that section. Here's where there's their untaxed income, and then you have their federal benefits such as the WIC, free lunch program, Medicaid, all of that, and then you have a dedicated household section, and you'll notice this year that the little chart that used to be in last year's form is gone. And that was to better align with the FAFSA. FAFSA does not ask that level of detail up front. They ask for it later. So again, this is, I think, a good thing for high schoolers because there's always a lot of confusion. You know, the institutions may have to do a little bit more work to confirm that these are right. But the instructions on how many people are in your household are right there above the question. And then how many of those will be in college. It has very detailed instructions on how to do that. So if you've been doing TASFA and FAFSA a while, you probably already know what those rules are. If you're newer to it, you will want to read those carefully because there's a lot of little caveats. All right, moving to section 2. This is just your student status determination, or what a lot of people call dependency status. We try not to use that language just because a lot of 18-year-olds feel like they're independent, but in fact, they're not when it comes to determining financial aid status. So these have not changed. They're exactly the same as the FAFSA. If anything, we tried to make sure to go in and really tweak the language so that they're identical. So we did our best there. So that's what section 2, and now we'll move to section 3. Section 3 now is a dedicated parent section. Again, very similar to FAFSA, maybe not in the identical order, but very similar in how the questions are asked and how they'll be answering that. I'm not going to go into too much here. You know, if you've worked with it for a while, you understand how to go about that. Usually you want to meet with the family so you can explain this in more detail, but it has all the same questions as FAFSA this year. Moving to section 4, this is new, and we added this on purpose because one of the things that we got feedback on from high school counselors was, you know, there's a lot of photocopying going on. There's lots of students who want to submit it to multiple schools and they have to mail it or go drop it off or upload it. It can get very confusing if you have one copy and then you're like, wait a minute, which one did I send it to and where did it go? So what we did is we added the college on there so they can either print it out, they can type it in, they can do different options, or they can leave it blank. They don't have to put a school on there. It was just helpful for like future reference, or if they're going to be sending it different places, it helps them to be able to differentiate applications. And then, as you know, their living status could be different depending on which school they're applying to. One of them, they might be living at home. Another one, they'd have to move away and live on campus, or maybe they get an apartment. So it really just changes per school. The last little piece there is the college student ID. This one is helpful. We built this in more for the online form, but it can be used for the paper as well. This helps in case they have students with similar names, date of birth. It's just a way to match them to their student record once they apply to college. So again, if they are like, oh my gosh, I don't have one, don't panic. It's not a big deal. They can totally apply and they don't need the college ID, but if they do have it, it just is one more piece of data to help match them. The signature section's been modified slightly, again, to match the online form a little bit, just clarifying that if they make a mistake or they need to fix something, they do have to go to the institution directly, and that they need to send all their applications directly to the institution. They don't come to the coordinating board, even though we create that application. Whew. Okay, we have 11 minutes left, but I did want to go into the online TASFA because even though we're not going to launch when we had intended, we do want people to have a sneak peek and kind of understand how it's going to work. So we did put this together for y'all. These are just screenshots, but they will be similar in nature. That's why a lot of them say mock-ups. So as we continue development and whatnot, they could change a bit, but the concept is going to be the same. So right here on the screen, what you have is a mock-up of the Apply Now, but before they get there, they're actually going to start on a landing page, which we'll start in just a minute. But one of the things we wanted to point out here is we will be reaching out to y'all for training. We will provide advanced notification and get y'all familiar with the different tools, such as the toolkits and things through Encores. So if you're not signed up, make sure you do sign up so that you can be informed. Otherwise, it's always going to be like, wait, what happened? Wait, what's going live? So we want y'all to be connected. So try and use the resources that they provided so that you're in the loop. All right, so let's look at this. So when the student first is going to be directed to a main landing page, again, this is a mock-up. It will not look like this, but we needed something to give y'all some inspiration on how it's going to work. But it's going to be on the coordinating board's website, and it allows the student to register. You'll notice it kind of has a new user box there, like here, create your account, or it's going to have like a returning user if they want to log back in at a later point. It's also going to clarify that they don't need to do both TASFA and FAFSA. That's going to be the big one here. We get that all the time where students do both or they don't know if they're supposed to do both. So we're going to have that language on the landing page to redirect them to the FAFSAs in case they are confused, and we don't want them to have to do both. It'll also include a couple other resources that we're working on. So the landing page is really just kind of informational, and it's going to be their starting point. Once they go into the page, if you can actually back up a slide, I'm so sorry. Go back to, this is when they get into their account. That's when they click Apply Now. I probably should have done these backwards, so sorry about that. So once they click Apply Now, and we'll go forward too, there we go. They're going to land on the application year page. And in the future, there may be multiple applications. As you know, when they're applying to go to school, sometimes maybe they're a dual credit student or they're already going to college. Maybe there's an opportunity for them to fill out 2 forms. When we first start, there's only going to be one, but in the future, there may be multiple. But on the screen, again, you can see some information there. You can see in the middle in bright red, it says you don't need to do both. We have a link again to the FAFSA. We're really trying to make sure that's clear. And we also included the state priority line. So when they're ready, they click Start. And that's a button that's going to change as they go through the application. It's going to go from start to resume, and then it's going to show that they've completed their form once they're done. Once they kind of proceed forward, it goes into an instruction page. And this is going to primarily help them understand the technical aspect of the TASFA, like how to navigate through things and what all the buttons mean. So that's kind of what the purpose of the instructions tab is going to be there once we get that finished. Moving into the student tab, you're going to have exactly what I just went through. So you'll notice it goes on the left-hand side. You see student, dependency, parent, college, and signature. That's the exact same order as the paper form we just went through. And the questions are lined up line by line. So question 1 on the paper will be question 1 on the TASFA online. So everything is in alignment. You'll notice here, there's the education details we talked about. We have it built in so that they can find their high school. I should have probably provided a better screenshot, but when they say if they've completed high school in Texas, we have a listing of all the high schools that they'll be able to select. And once they submit their TASFA, that's where it's going to generate the counselor suite update. So all of this has been developed with these things in mind. You can also see the selective service status statement right there on the screen. So again, we're collecting everything we do on the paper, but just in an online version. Running through to the dependency tab, we may change the name of this, but as of right now, it's called dependency. They will answer all these questions, and that will drive whether they have to answer the parent section or not. In the event the student doesn't have access to their parent's information, they don't want to submit with their parent, but they're required, they will not be able to do the online version. There's no exception or pass where they can click a button and they can still submit. They would need to do the paper form if they're going to be requesting, say, like a professional judgment or some kind of alternate way to apply. The parent section will display on the screen if they're deemed dependent, and it has some skip logic in there. So if their parents are married, both of the parents will pop up. If they put that they're single, widow, divorced, any of those, then it kind of hides fields as needed. So there is skip logic built into this form. Moving on to college, we do have this set up similar to the FAFSA in the sense that they can pick 10 schools at a time. The cool thing about this is where they select their housing status. So for each school that they click on, it will have the designated housing status, and then they can put that college ID in there, which is optional. Again, if they leave it blank, it's not going to do anything. It's just more of a matching tool. The cool part is after they've submitted to 10, unlike the FAFSA, they can go back and they can submit to up to 10 more. So hypothetically, they could apply to every school in the state of Texas. But coming from an institution, please don't let your students do that. It causes a lot of additional administrative work on the school side, but we do want them to apply to any school that they're interested in so that they can compare the options and how much money they would get from each of those schools. Last tab here, signature tab. Oh, I didn't do it. That's okay. I don't have a picture. They're just going to sign the form. It's an electronic signature, and both the parent and the student would be able to sign. Some of the features that you can see on the screen here, if you can back up one more, there you go. The application's dynamic, so when they pull it up on their smartphone or tablet, it's going to adjust on the screen, so that's helpful because we know pretty much everyone does everything on their phones, at least I do. So that's one feature. The next is the navigation buttons at the top, so they can go from tab to tab. It's not chronological. You don't have to complete one before the next, which is helpful, especially for people who may be confused on questions. They can just save it and come back later. And then the last feature that we have, you'll see kind of on the screen, are those little blue information buttons. Those are help icons. So those are very closely aligned with FAFSA and the paper form, and they'll just help guide the students so they know how to fill in those questions more easily. So I just gave a lot of information. We're already out of time, but happy to try and circle back for any questions. I think that we have one more piece, which is the counselor suite, which is the one that y'all are probably most interested in. So I will turn it over to Claudette one last time so she can just touch on this, and then we'll wrap things up. If she's there.
Yes, I am
There
here.
you are.
I'm here. Sorry. I am trying to get to where we need to be. Sorry, I have a lot of things open. Hold on.
While you're doing that, Claudette, Leah, there's a few questions in the chat.
I see. I'm trying to like skim through them here. Somebody asked about schools who are piloting the online, or maybe you're asking if they'll still have theirs. There are a few institutions that had already built an online TASFA, and so there are a few schools that will continue to use that in the interim until the online form goes live. You will just need to check with them to see if they'll have it available, because we haven't been told which ones will be ready. As far as pilots go, we're looking at piloting this with 1 or 2 schools. We just haven't made those determinations yet. So right now, unfortunately, it's just the paper, but soon we'll have the online. Somebody asked, I'm kind of going backwards here unless Claudette, do you want to hop in? I don't want to
Sure.
steal your thunder.
I know we have lots of questions, so I'm going to really quickly go over the last 2 slides and then we'll get into more questions. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Counselor Suite, the Counselor Suite is the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board oversees the Apply Texas system, which includes this central website through which individuals can complete and submit their applications. Along with the system also includes a Counselor Suite. And this is a tool that's used by counselors and authorized users who can track student progress in completing both the Apply Texas application as well as FAFSA completions. The availability of this data is, for admissions and financial aid, it helps the counselors target their efforts. And what it does is it offers a list of you can view a list of students at their school who have started and completed both the admission application, the Apply Texas admission application. It also links to individual student level data and gives details to review a student's application progress. Users can also view a student's FAFSA filing status and create reports on student applications. When the online TASFA is available, a student's online TASFA data will be included in the Counselor Suite as well. And this data is going to be similar. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you. The data will include the following. It'll include the last name and first name of the applicant, as well as their middle initial, their date of birth, and their high school name, completion status, and completed date. So it'll be provided in a similar manner that the FAFSA data is available in the Counselor Suite. And that's going to be expected once we have the online TASFA application up and running and the data can be easily transferred into that Counselor Suite. So I know we're at time, but we're happy to answer any questions at this point.
Yeah, I would say this, if you're able to stay on for 5 more minutes for the panelists and the guest speakers, if you can stay on for 5 more minutes and field any questions, that's great. If not, we are keeping track of questions in the chat and things like that. And if you're attending and you need to drop off, if you could just really quickly scan the QR code. This is a very, very, very short series of like 5 questions, and we appreciate the feedback and we do read it, whether it's good or bad. It's really helpful to us. So there's a couple of questions in the chat or the Q&A. Leah, I'll turn it over to you to see if there's anything you want to answer.
Sure. I was like sitting here chatting away at all the participants, and then I realized I'm not answering anyone because it's just going to the panel.
Sometimes
So,
that happens. It's a funny default setting we have.
Right.
Okay, so it says, let's see, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. I'm going way up to the top here. It says, what happens to a student's financial aid if the parent refuses to provide information or financial support? To answer your question, Wendy, usually the institution does have the ability to do a professional judgment depending on the circumstances. So for now, you would want to have the student complete a paper application. If they don't have parent information, they would simply submit that to the school and then reach out to discuss the next steps on that. It does not mean that they would be disqualified, but it doesn't also guarantee that they will get state aid either. It's really an institutional decision. It says, let's see, just to clarify, ooh, it's hopping all over. Is right under Wendy's question. Where'd it go? Just to clarify, students will need all of the documents before they complete the online TASFA, or can they upload these items at a different time? They will not be able to upload information into the TASFA. It's simply collecting data elements to send to the school. And another thing to keep in mind is each institution may ask for different backup documentation. You may have one college that doesn't want anything from the student, and you have another one who wants 5 different items. So it's probably better to some extent so that the student doesn't have to hop through unnecessary hoops. I know that that's a lot of burden when they're applying to a lot of schools, but that's just kind of the reality of each school has discretion on what they collect from the student. So it is good to gather those so that they can input them correctly, but they will not be able to send them with their online form. Let's see.
Leah, I can read them for you. I was trying to find the last question you asked, answered. So I can read these for you while So it was the
Sure.
affidavit. It was Lauren Disher's question that you just answered.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to, will these resources and links be available after the meeting? I believe, yes, they said, yes, they're going to be sent out. So does the TASFA form come from Apply Texas or College for All Texans? The
Which
TASFA,
one?
it says, does the TASFA form come from Apply Texas or College for All Texans?
So the College for All Texans document will be linked to Apply Texas, so it's going to be the same form. So the one that I showed you on the screen that's branded with the coordinating board, that's the official copy starting this year. So it will be in both places. It'll probably be all over the place, but the way you'll know it's the correct one is with the coordinating board branding on it.
Correct. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question I see. Would a school's version of the eTASFA count with that law? Example, University of Houston had an eTASFA before.
I think I touched on this. You'll want to follow up
Okay.
with University of Houston on their availability. They may or may not be continuing to use that. Once we go live with the online, like in future, let's just talk about like 2 years from now, it will be one state application. There won't be different versions. In this transitionary period, it will depend on the school.
I'm going to address this one. Will you all email out the recording information? Yes, Melissa, that information will be sent out. And for clarification, did you say that the state is still requiring FAFSA TASFA students to complete the SS form to be eligible for aid?
Yes, so for both FAFSA and TASFA students to receive state aid, and very limited, there's a couple of federal programs that do also require this, so that's why it's important to know it still exists. There is a selective service status form that the student has to fill out that's through the institution. So for your purposes, if you're doing the TASFA, simply have them fill out that section and move on. For FAFSA, the school that they apply to will likely give them the form to fill out. So I wouldn't go to the effort of having them do it, even though there is a state form that you could have them complete. Some schools have it on their portal. They have different methods to collect that. So, but to answer your question, yes, FAFSA and TASFA students have to complete a designated status form to be eligible for state aid.
Okay, and Jessica Delmer followed up with another question saying, does that include grants from the state that wouldn't be awarded to a FAFSA student? And from what I heard you say, you said yes, correct?
Yes, they would not be able to get things like Texas Grant, TEOG. Basically, any state program requires selective service status confirmation.
Right. I believe you covered this, but I'm just going to ask it again just in case. Will there be any universities continuing to pilot the online TASFA? I believe you covered that already.
Yes.
So if they were in DFPS custody due to parental abandonment, they would need to complete paper application? Question mark.
Correct. Yes. So
Yes.
if there's a special circumstance where because of their age and their marital status and all those other questions, it's still deeming them dependent, they would need to do the paper form and follow up with the school to find out what, either backup documentation or what they would need to do. It does not mean that they would not qualify for anything. It just means that the online form is not that sophisticated yet.
Okay, I think there's a few more, there's several good ones. For parent signature, how is that going to be validated? And email to the parent question mark, etc. Or are they just trusting the student?
So the parent and the student will both have to have separate email accounts. If the parent doesn't have one, they would either need to create an email through, Gmail or something, some other platform, or they would have to do the paper form if they don't feel comfortable doing that, or if they just don't have one. But the system will not allow the parent to sign unless it's a different email. We have absolutely no way to validate that, but that's technically the case for FAFSA too. We know that they use social security number, but ultimately the student could be doing that on the back end. We'll never know. Now, when the parent logs in, they will have access to the application simply to sign the application, and then the school will follow up with things like tax information or any, birth certificate, driver's license, anything that they need to validate who they are or their data, the institution would do. So I hope that answered that.
Yeah, yes. And so there are a few more questions. I mean, there's about 4 or 5, I think. So I'm going to try to rush through these as quickly
Okay.
as we can. Will the online FAFSA have an option to upload documents such as tax returns, transcript, affidavit, etc.?
I think we
I think there's
answered
a
that.
correction was TASFA, yeah.
Yeah, we
and
already answered that one. So no, they won't be able to upload on the initial launch. They just have to send those to the school, but make sure you wait to find out what the school wants.
Correct. So students that don't automatically qualify for independency would need to fill out the paper form, question mark?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I think I had saw one other question, seen one other question. And she said, I might have missed you all saying this earlier, but the recording will be sent. Yes, it will be sent. For the student who doesn't have parent assistance information in terms of House Bill 3 and the requirement, that would be considered complete because they did submit, question mark. I'm not certain what this question is asking.
Maybe they're asking for high school graduation requirement if they.
It is, but I don't know what they're asking.
I mean, they do have the alternatives on the opt-out form. So like the counselor, if you deem them, eligible to opt out, if they don't have parent assistance, yes, I mean, they would be considered complete if they opt out of doing a TASFA or FAFSA. I think that's what you're asking.
I think so. It's a little confusing, but Susie, if you're still on, please let us know if you have.
Retype it.
Yeah. Okay, and then let's see. I think there's 2 more. Are there any resources that will be made available to address who will have access to the submitted information and where it will be housed? As you can imagine, this will be a sensitive subject for some of the families we serve.
If you're asking about how we're going to store TASFA information, it's housed through a state agency, which is completely secure. And then those files are sent securely to the college or university. And then as far as the information collected for the high school counselor suite for completion, also a secure method of transporting that over to the counselor suite. So, I mean, everything is encrypted. I don't know how to answer that clearly, but
well, and there is in statute a limitation to who has access to that data. So if that's the concern, just know that there is in the statute a relevant statute that does limit the availability of the data of who it goes to. So it's not widely shared.